Because of the market conditions and insane prices that are going on right now, I thought it would be helpful to talk about the pre-built PCs that I've reviewed in the past and what they're being currently sold for. You can potentially take a look at that versus what I recommended as far as the pricing goes. Hopefully that'll help you guys to figure out whether or not you should actually buy one of those pre-builts if that's what you're looking at. So let's get to it. So I did this review for the Y40 with the 4070 and the 7700 CPU back in January of 2025. So more than a year ago. So you'd think that that price would be going down over time, but it really hasn't, mostly because of how the market has shifted with valuations, insane valuations. Here's the closest thing I could find at the retail level, which came with the 5070. The 265F, but I couldn't find that specific model other than a used one, and so I just picked pretty much the closest one I could find, which was this particular model at Walmart for $1,600 right now. And that price really, I mean, if we're talking pre-RAM apocalypse kind of era, then that's overpriced, right? If you recall, I picked up the 4070/7700X PC for about $1,000. It was on sale, and I believe it was through Walmart. And after tax price would have been closer to, had I put this PC together myself, would have been closer to about like $1,500 and change. And so it would have been $1,400 or so before tax. And so this one I feel is at least a couple of $100 overvalued. But at the same time, if we're gonna go with current market conditions at current market values, then it's not necessarily a bad buy. It really comes down to whether or not you yourself feel that that has the value it does. I'd encourage you to take a look at the review I did, because this PC is not much different. Maybe there's like a 5 to 10% uplift for this particular PC versus the original one that I reviewed. But I'd encourage you to take a look at that review and determine for yourself whether or not that's worth the buy. I did find the PC on eBay for this one as an open box item. The actual PC that I reviewed, which is the 4070 with the 7700, that's selling for $1,400, which is really what it was pretty much valued at when I did the review. And so there is an opportunity, if you look around, to be able to find this particular PC at the $1,400 range. Now, if you recall, I bought it for $1,000, not $1,400. And so if you can find this PC for $1,000, then I would highly encourage you to get it, because the price to performance just can't be beat. So the next pre-built PC that I reviewed was the Alienware Aurora R16, and I did that one back in March of 2025. It was almost a year ago to date. And that one had the RTX 4090 with 14900KF CPU, and it had 32 gigs of RAM. It might have had 64 gigs of RAM when I got that PC for $2,500. But this is about as close as we're gonna get that I could find. And again, this one was on eBay as a used system, and this person's trying to sell it for $3,455. He does have a make offer button on there, and that's important. I mean, sometimes you'd be surprised. Sometimes they'll say yes to an offer, especially if what they're selling has been sitting for a while. So yeah, $3,455 is kind of overpriced. It does have an RTX 4090, which is valued at currently over $2,000, but its MSRP was at $1,600, right? And so at $1,600, that would imply that everything else in the PC is worth $1,800, and so that is overpriced in my opinion. I think $2,500, which is what I got the original R16 PC that I reviewed. That's what I got it for, and I paid no tax on it because it was just somebody that had it new in a box that was trying to sell it because they changed their mind on it. And at that time, that particular PC was selling online for about $4,400 retail before tax. And so if you compare that to this price, then it seems like a good deal. But I'd say maybe $3,000. I might do $3,000 for a PC like this. Almost $3,500, probably not. So the next PC I reviewed was back in April of 2025, and that was the CyberpowerPC Gamer Supreme. And that had the RX 9070 XT 16 gig and the 7800 X3D. It did have 32 gigs of DDR5, and I believe it did have a 2 terabyte SSD in there. And so when I bought that, I believe I bought that for $1,950, and right now it's selling on Best Buy. It's available right now for $1,900, so less than what I got it for. And I believe I recommended that this was not a bad price, this price range for this particular PC. And so if you can find this over at Best Buy or elsewhere at a similar price point, it's not a bad buy. If you can find it for less, once in a while, I've seen it a couple of times for sale at like $1,750. And I think a few of the commenters on that video actually got it below that price. So there are times when it will go on sale. So I would be on the lookout if $1,900 is a little bit too much for what you think it's worth. And by the way, this is this is absolutely the highest view count video that I've done so far, at well over 24,000 views. And so for those of you that watched it and liked it and enjoyed it and subscribed because of it, thank you so much. I can't say enough how surprised and happy it made me to see how well this particular video performed. And so I also found the same PC on Newegg going for $2,300. So don't get it at $2,300. It's not worth $2,300. Even if you think that current market values are acceptable, I personally can't recommend it at $2,300. That's just too much. That's $500 more, or actually $400 more than the exact same PC that you find at Best Buy, right? So if you get it at Best Buy, get it at Best Buy. If you can't get it at Best Buy and it's above $1,900, then I can't recommend it above that price, not in good conscience. The next PC I reviewed was the HP Omen 45L GT22, and that was back in June of last year. And that was after I went to a grand opening for a micro center at Santa Clara. And that was the first time I had ever been to a micro center. That place was huge. It had all kinds of stuff. I was really impressed with the place. I wasn't impressed with the pricing of most of their components, but they did have some good deals over there. And the PC that I reviewed was this exact PC with the 285K, 64 gigs of DDR4, 2 terabyte SSD, and the RTX 5090 was in it. And I believe, if I recall correctly, and I do recall correctly, I picked this PC up for $3,600 at that time. And that was an acceptable price for that PC at that time, because it had 64 gigs of RAM, because it had a 2 terabyte SSD. 285K, believe it or not, from a creativity and a productivity standpoint, is an excellent CPU. Gaming, not so much, but everything else, 285K is pretty good CPU. And it had obviously the RTX 5090. If you look at this price at $5,500 versus what I paid for at $3,600, kind of hard to recommend this PC at that price point. $3,600, maybe $4,000. $5,500, absolutely not. Actually, if I recall correctly, I recommended try to get it under the $3,600 that I got mine for, because that's what the actual value of this PC is. $3,600 is probably the most I would pay for a PC like this. And so that's why you haven't seen me do a 5090 PC since, because you know the prices are insane, and so I refuse to buy anything that is overvalued. So don't get this PC at this price point. Wait till it goes down, even if it takes a year or two. And over at the HP site, it's going for even more, almost $400 more than over at Best Buy. The exact same PC, by the way. So yeah, but once in a while, HP does have their own sales on their own sites. I believe I saw it at one point in time at, I think it was like $3,300, $3,400, which would have been below the price I got it at. So there's been times where they do those kind of deals, but it's here and there, right? It's sporadic. So, you know, if you're gonna keep checking back at this site, I would save it or bookmark it somehow, and check back once in a while to see if the price has changed for the better. Then the next PC that I reviewed is the CyberpowerPC Gamer Xtreme, and that came with the 5060 Ti 16 gig. It had the 14700F CPU in it. It had 16 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte SSD. So this is the same PC that I reviewed, and I believe I picked that up for $1,200, and this person's selling it for pretty much $1,200, and it says here new in the box. So if it's a sealed new in the box PC at $1,200, it's not a bad price. Personally, I think it's closer to about like $900, $950, I believe is what I recommended it at, for multiple reasons, not just the components, but the build quality and things like that. I was a little disappointed in this PC, if I recall correctly. Given current market conditions, it's not necessarily a bad price, but given what it's actually worth, that's a little on the high side. The next PC I reviewed was back in October of last year, and that was the iBuyPower Slate 9. It came with the 7800 X3D and the 9070 XT. It did have 32 gigs of DDR5, and it had a 1 terabyte SSD. So this is the exact same PC that I reviewed, same case and everything. And I picked that up for a little over $1,500. A little over $1,500. I'm saying that again because look at this motherfucker here. It's almost $1,000 more now on Best Buy, which is insane. This PC is not worth $2,500, not even close. I believe I recommended this PC because of what it came with and the build quality. I think it had a 240mm AIO instead of a 360 like the other CyberpowerPC one that had equivalent CPU and GPU. And so I don't even know I think this PC was a good deal at $1,500 when I bought it. Maybe $1,600 to $1,700 would have been fine, maybe a little bit more even, but at $2,500, run, don't walk, run away from this PC. It's not worth that. Then the next PC I reviewed back in November of last year was the HP Omen 16L, and that came with the 265F CPU and the 5060 Ti 16 gig. It did come with the 16 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. And so this is the exact same model that I reviewed. And I think I got that for less than $1,200. I think it was like $1,190 or $1,180 or something like that. Right now it's on sale for $1,280 over at Best Buy. You know, it's not a good price. I don't like that price. I'd get this PC if it was like $800, $850, $900, maybe $950. But at $1,280, this PC is not worth it for a lot of reasons, not just the components. The case limits you on upgradability. It also limits you on the power supply, the cooling. You'd have to pretty much remove everything and put it into a new case, which would mean that you couldn't carry over the motherboard. And so there's a lot of downsides to a small form factor 16L HP Omen PC. And because of that, and because of the value of the components, at $1,280, that is not a good buy. I would stay away from that. Then the next PC I reviewed, which was back in January of this year. I think I want to say I released that video on New Year's Day, as a matter of fact. And that's the Stormcraft Phantom PC. I picked that PC up for, I want to say it was $2,000, and it had the RTX 5080 in it. I think it was the MSI Shadow 3XOC was the GPU that was in there, and it did have the 265F CPU. It did have the 32 gigs of DDR5 at 6,000 megahertz, I believe it was. 850 watt power supply is what it had. Had the 360 millimeter AIO. So this is pretty much the exact same PC that I reviewed back in January. And like I said, I picked that up for about $2,000, and now it's at $2,500. And it did have the holiday bundle, by the way. It wasn't the Resident Evil Requiem. It did have the Intel holiday bundle. It was an okay performing PC, and at $2,000, I thought it was a worthwhile price. At $2,500, that's over the top. I didn't like the case. There was a lot of build quality issues going on with that PC, and so I wasn't very happy. And so I had a lot of questions and a lot of problems with the PC. And so $2,000 was probably the maximum, maybe $2,100 that I would have paid for this kind of PC. And at $2,500, like I said, I don't see it being worth that much. Although the 5080 by itself right now is selling for at retail like $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, sometimes $1,500. And so I can see how a person could justify for themselves buying this, but I would. You're overpaying, and you're only enabling companies to keep prices at inflated levels regardless of market conditions. The more often you buy things that are overvalued and being sold at overvalued prices. So if it goes down to 2,000, it's a good pickup. If it doesn't go down to 2,000 and it stays above it, then I'd say you're better off without it. And here's the same PC. This one had a bit of an upgraded RAM at 6,400. I think the one I reviewed had 6,000 mega transfers. But other than that, it was pretty much the same. And it's also being sold at Best Buy for $2,500, which is also obviously not worth it. And then the next PC that I reviewed was later in January of this year. Less than a month later, I reviewed the iBuyPower Y40 with the 7900X CPU and the RTX 5080. I believe the 5080 that I got this with was the MSI Inspire, which is a slightly smaller form factor than some of the other MSI 5080 models, but it had better cooling and it had a pretty unique look to it. I kind of liked that one. I still have that GPU because I liked it so much. Anyways, and I believe it did have 32 gigs of DDR5, but I think it was 5,600 mega transfers, not 6,000, but I could be misremembering. And I believe it did have a 2 terabyte SSD that it came with, and I got that for less than $2,000. I think it was $1,950, maybe a little bit more, but it was under $2,000 that I picked it up for. And at that price range for this build, that's a good price. At $2,500, it's a little overpriced. It's overpriced by at least $300, if not more, as far as I'm concerned, and what the value of this particular set of components are. And although I do like the look and feel of the Y40, it does limit you to vertical only GPU mounting, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I hate limitations when it comes to builds. And so that was one of the downsides of the Y40 case for me. At $2,000, like I said, it's not a bad buy. $2,450, it's a little on the high side by about at least $300, if not more. So if you could wait it out and see if it comes back down to around $2,000, then I would wait it out. And oh my God, Newegg is trying to sell this thing, the same PC, except for the 9900X versus the 7900X, which doesn't really outperform the 7900X by all that much. So it's practically the same exact PC, and they're trying to sell it at 3100. And if I have a hard time recommending it above 2000 to 2100, then 3100 is right out. Do not get this PC at this price. You will regret it. Because prices will come down sooner or later. And sooner or later, you're gonna come across something like this where it says like 2100, and you're gonna remember that you paid $1,000 more for the exact same PC, and then you're gonna be upset with yourself. Don't do it. Don't do that to yourself. And don't encourage these companies with these hyper inflated prices. All right, so that's pretty much it for my thoughts on these PCs that I've reviewed. I wanted to make sure that you guys understood the actual value versus what they're actually being sold for, mostly because I'm always worried that somebody is going to watch one of my videos and then go right out and buy a PC or component because I recommended it at a certain price. And then, you know, there's that fallacy of somebody going in with the mindset of buying something and finding out that the price is different, i.e. higher, and because they were already committed in their minds to getting it, they just pay the extra money anyways just so that they can get it. And I'm always afraid of that, because the last thing I want to do is get you guys jazzed about a specific product and then you regretting that purchase in the long run. So that's why I said the things I said for each of these individual PCs that I've reviewed in the past and what their current prices are. So hopefully that helps you to get it in better perspective before you go into a store and buy it, because I don't want you guys buying something that you're going to regret, and I certainly don't want you guys buying something and encouraging these companies with their hyperinflated prices. Hopefully you found the information valuable and maybe even entertaining. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe down below, because it does help out the channel a ton. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments or anything, feel free, even if it's just to say hi, down in the comments. And if you got a question or a comment about a specific PC I've reviewed, feel free to write it down here or in the pertinent video for the particular PC that you wanted to talk about. In the meantime, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next one.